Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're seeing this edition of Hypnosis Week. As many of you may already know, my name by birth is Alex William Smith, but I'm better known in the hypnosis and my magic industries under the stage name Jonathan Royal. And it's my great pleasure this week to have a guest who, as we record this on the 13th of January 2020, I say that because you might be seeing this in a decade's time. But if you look around that time period, and I hope it continues for him, on Google, you'll see that he's been getting an awful lot of national newspaper, magazine, internet, radio, and television exposure for his current, I'm going to say his current niche. He may explain this is something he's done for ages and only just got publicity with, but we'll let him tell us about that in a minute, of treating people who've got addictions to box sets and binge TV. So it may not be a physical box set. It could be the fact you can get the whole series on Netflix. A little bit I can tell you in advance is that Adam, 23 years ago, no, not 23 years ago, 18 years ago at the age of 23, set up a public relations company called The Relations Group that's still running. And as you'll see if you go and search out their website, deal with household name brands and companies, people you will have heard of. Even if you're not in England, you'll have heard of a lot of these companies, okay? So we're talking the real deals, not some Mickey Mouse outfit. We're talking real public relations. Kind of like Max Clifford, but without the paedophile action. And in more recent years, he's established himself as the Phobia Guru, as you can see on phobiaguru.com, and lots of other areas. So welcome to the show, Adam. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for the invite.
So yeah, let's jump in right at the beginning. Most recently, I've seen you popping up all over the media with this curing people's addictions to binge TV and box sets. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, I mean, it came about. One of my brands is, you mentioned Phobia Guru. I also have a brand called Addiction Experts. And what tends to happen, because I get, quite a lot of media coverage, my websites rank quite highly. And what tends to happen is that when journalists want to do a story on an unusual addiction, they tend to reach out to me. So I was featured all over the BBC last year on gaming disorder. The World Health Organization deemed it to be an actual condition rather than just people playing too much games. And a journalist from The Telegraph got in contact with me because of my work on gaming disorder and said, you haven't worked with anyone watching too much TV, like box sets and things like that. And although I'd only worked with 3 clients last year, which, I mean, we're talking like 7, 8, 9 hours worth of TV pretty much every single day. So I had a relatively few number of clients, but I could talk without obviously revealing the client's name, still respecting confidentiality. But some of the reasons why they were watching too much TV, and it wasn't because the content on Netflix was so great. It was because it offered the ability for them not to think about their problems. It was being used as a form of self-medication. It was a coping strategy. So because I had some genuine clients that I could talk about that, they wrote an article, and it was a fairly big article, page 3 of the Daily Telegraph, so it's quite a big article. And then various news outlets started contacting me because, weirdly, I would have thought, many addiction experts would have covered this before because it's not particularly a new thing. But I think because it came into the media the day after the Golden Globes, when Netflix had won tons of awards, it kind of hit the timing quite right. And then I was on Jeremy Vine, and I was on numerous BBC radio channels and this kind of thing. So it's weird because although I'm in the media a lot for gaming disorder and TV addictions, that's such a small percentage of the clients that I work with. But as you know, the media can distort a perception, and then people see things as they've seen it through the media rather than, what you're actually doing. So although I've done relatively few clients, I'm kind of seen as an authority in that particular area. Whereas the vast majority of my hypnosis clients tend to be weight loss phobias and your more standard addictions like cocaine, for example. Okay. But that's not newsy as far as the media is concerned.
At the moment, unless something must happen with a celebrity, I guess, suddenly confessing their life's been screwed up with cocaine, and you were perhaps fortunate enough to, through your PR company, jump on and harness that. I know you said you found it surprising no one had done the binge TV thing in the media before, but I think, and what's your view on this? Because obviously, having set up a PR company, you see things somewhat differently than the average hypnotherapist will, who doesn't have that kind of background. They probably have thought of it, and there probably are therapists out there that are watching this now, kicking themselves, thinking, "I've seen loads of bloody clients like that." What would you say to people who perhaps have had what might be deemed, to them, they might take it as granted because they get a load of clients like that, but could be deemed newsworthy because it's out of the ordinary? Now, obviously, I know the answer should be contact the relations group and I would say fork out some money. But if you were prepared to take them on, I noticed that you put your balls on the line and offer a payment on results service, which is pretty unheard of in the PR industry.
Yeah, a lot of PR agency people, they talk a good game and don't necessarily back that up. So for me, I think one of the core almost values of mine is that if I can't genuinely help people, I don't deserve their money. And I have that approach for PR, but also hypnosis as well. So if someone was listening to this and they thought, could I get them PR? Realistically, I've tried it, a couple of times with like other, people that I know in the therapy and coaching world. And in all honesty, without sounding arrogant, it's not really worth my while doing that because we work with big brands and things like that. So I am creating a course that kind of takes what I take for granted in terms of securing PR coverage so that, in the future, if there was a hypnotherapist, a coach out there, they could download that course. And it's me taking about 20 hours worth of content and putting it into a very easy to understand format. Sure. Because that way it's kind of worth my while because I can do the work once and then other people can learn how to do it. Yeah. And not everyone wants PR. Not everyone sees value in it, because one of the key questions I get asked all the time is, do you get loads of clients off the back of it? And there's a weird kind of answer to it. You do, but in a roundabout way. When I'm featured on national TV, national radio, people assume the phone's going to be ringing off the hook and you're going to get inquiry after inquiry. It doesn't really work that way. For me, what I found is that it definitely helps with my credibility. It definitely helps with how I'm perceived to be in terms of competency. It gives me great content that I can put on my website and social media channels. And when I get online coverage, they tend to link back to my website, which really helps with the SEO rankings. So for one of my brands, Phobia Guru, for example, I do no advertising whatsoever. But what I do is a combination of content and PR. And that means that because effectively each phobia is its own landing page, and if you have a particular phobia, you're going to search for a specific term, I get lots of traffic. And then I back up each page with a 10-minute video where I explain a bit about that phobia. And I find that a combination of SEO and PR, for me, my cost per acquisition per client is zero for Phobia Guru. It's absolutely nothing. Excellent. So that, in a roundabout way, it's infinitely valuable. But I think a lot of people have this kind of naive thinking when it comes to marketing, and that is that everything is designed to do exactly the same thing. So if you do PR, or if you do a Facebook ad, or if you do adverts in a local newspaper, all of that is designed to generate a client. And for me, marketing is a set of tools, just like hypnosis. You wouldn't use a swish pattern in the same way that you use regression, for example. You use the right tools for the right situation. And I think that's partly why I don't work with therapists and coaches directly for PR, because there's this expectation that, one press release is going to go out, they're going to be on the front page of the Times and then get loads of clients. And it's a long game, it's a drip. Well,
also, I think some people watching this would think, well, obviously you wouldn't want to work with people in the same industry anyway because of the competition thing. But from my point of view, I know that, if there was somebody who looked very similar to you, who was male and did similar things, that would potentially be a conflict. But there's no reason why you couldn't be, advising someone who was female who did similar, or a man who looked totally different, so would appeal to a different demographic. Because from my experience, the media are very fickle. If they've got a certain marketplace, they want someone who fits that. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts is kind of the opposite in a way, and that is that I think that the tragedy with hypnotherapists is that you have lots of highly competent hypnotherapists that aren't seeing enough clients. And for me, I think the whole industry would benefit from more competent hypnotherapists doing more effective marketing, because then it elevates the whole industry. And I think, good hypnotherapists that don't really understand about marketing, branding, and PR, in my experience at least, have this belief system that if they become a better therapist, they'll simply get more clients. And that isn't the case. You have to supplement the therapy skills with other business skills. And weirdly, I would say when I started out, I wasn't a particularly good therapist, because how can you be without experience? But I was a good marketer, and I was a good at branding and having, lots of hypnotherapists are generalists. And I had 3 very specific specializations. And because of that, I had lots of clients. And because I've seen so much of clients, I'm going to get better simply by being out there and doing it. And for me, I would encourage every hypnotherapist out there to kind of upskill, not in their therapy skills, but in their other areas, really get good at sales, marketing, branding, because you can be the best therapist in the world, but if you don't have any clients, you're not really helping anyone.
I completely agree. I know one of the mental blocks that I've found other people I've spoken to, certainly it's never got in my way, because bending the truth for the sake of getting publicity is not something I've got any qualms about, as anyone who's ever researched my past career on magicalguru.com would know. And from what you said before, you don't mind bending the truth a little bit. By that, I mean, for example, I was approached by the media in this years ago. This was in the 90s, and they said, have you got any unusual phobia clients you've dealt with? And I said, yeah, I cured a woman's fear of traffic wardens. And I still, to this day, not sure how this happened. It really must have been a slow news week. But the next day on the front page, full front page of the Sun newspaper, and this was in the 90s, 96, when the Sun was the biggest red paper, plus a double page spread inside, so I had 3 pages of that paper, Fear of the Yellow Peril was the headline, and overcoming a woman's fear of traffic wardens. It happened, I don't even know why that was newsworthy. That was pure fluke. But when they approached you and said about binge sets, they had something in their mind, clearly. You'd had a few clients, but the way that media comes across, it does look as though this is something you've been a specialist in for years.
I get what you mean in terms of bending the truth, but for me, I was very upfront, and I said, look, in every interview, I said, well, I haven't worked with many clients, but it does look like it's a rising trend. And obviously, with a PR background, I know that they're looking for sound bites. I know that they're looking for potential headlines. So for me, I consider a lot of things overlapping circles. There's what I know and what I can do, and then there's a story that they're looking for. And then there's this little shaded area in between that kind of ticks both boxes. So I'm never going to lie to a journalist and kind of pretend that something is the case simply to give them a story, because sooner or later you're going to get found out about that. And then it does the very opposite. Rather than enhancing reputation, it's going to destroy your reputation. But if I can take, I think the art of PR is taking truth and making it really interesting and engaging. So if I can find, for example, they were really interested in the fact that this 35-year-old guy that I was working with, he originally got into it through watching Breaking Bad, and through watching Breaking Bad, then he went into kind of crime dramas and things like that, and that made it a really interesting story for them, and that was the truth. That's what he was interested in. But if I'd have just said, generic information, oh, he just watches lots of TV, well, that doesn't really make it a story. So for me, I would say for any therapist out there, it's thinking of those really unusual, genuine clients that there's something about it that's really interesting. And you don't have to kind of be an authority on a particular topic. Simply by having a case study that is willing to kind of share an experience, that makes it quite an interesting, not news story, but feature story. So there's different ways in which you can kind of give journalists what they want. My advice to anyone out there that wants to kind of boost their profile, I would say, find the interesting nuggets within what you already do, and then make it really easy for a journalist to turn that into a story. And don't be afraid to kind of reach out to journalists, drop them an email, follow them on Twitter, reach out. And the other thing that I tend to do, which is quite useful, just as a tip that someone watching might find useful, is I have certain Google News alerts for certain things. So of course I have my own name in there, but I'll have Hypnosis, and I'll put other hypnotherapists in there so I can see what other hypnotherapists are doing to get media coverage, because I'm not going to copy what they do, but I might be able to find the root of their strategy. I mean, that's no different from NLP modeling. You want to find the structure of what works and then apply it in a different context. And that works for PR as well. So I think certain key things, if someone specializes in smoking cessation, put things like tobacco, smoking, vaping as Google News alerts. And when a story breaks, reach out to the journalists that have covered that and offer a different take from your particular perspective. And the thing is, what people don't understand about PR is that it's just content. And if you can make that content helpful and interesting, then the audience and the journalist, they don't consider that a sales pitch. They consider it helpful for the overall thing, because there are lots of people struggling with all kinds of different issues. And I think as therapists, our responsibility is to overcome the key hurdle, which I believe is that people don't believe that change can happen as quickly as it can happen. And if you can actually educate them that actually things can happen really, really quickly, and convince them with either real anecdotes or real stories, then suddenly they start thinking, oh, well, if it's possible for that person, maybe it's possible for me. And why I think there's such a good crossover between PR, sales, and hypnotherapy. Sales is the industry of influence. You've got to influence an individual. PR is the industry of perception management. How much of hypnosis and NLP is changing a core belief that someone has that simply isn't useful anymore? Well, that's also very similar to the industry of public relations. You're changing perceptions on a big scale. So when I became a hypnotherapist, I studied about 4.5 years ago. And I would say the other thing I've noticed about hypnotherapists that I studied with, a lot of people were very hesitant to actually go out there and start working with clients. They always think that they need to do another course or have another qualification. So for me, because I've been reasonably successful in business, I've never been afraid to kind of go out there and actually do stuff, which has helped me. But what I found is that when I was working with clients one-on-one in a hypnosis point of view, the fact that I could elicit information from them in the same way that I could do that from a client if I'm taking a brief for a PR campaign, the skills are way more transferable than I think most people realize. And I think a lot of the time people will assume becoming a hypnotherapist is some brand new skill. Whereas in actual fact, if you've had conversations, if you've helped people, if you've had a role where you communicated, those skills are just infinitely more transferable than I think most people think they are.
I think you bang on the nail there. Yeah, too many people out there teaching also purposely because they've got this vested interest of wanting to sell course after course, don't want people to realise how relevant certain things they may have already done in their life are, as you say. I guess, I totally agree with you there. What would you... And let me tell you up front here, I am not trying to trick you into a corner where you admit to have doing something unethical. But there again, you see, the thing about ethics is everyone's perception of them is different anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but let's throw it out there. PR-wise, in my experience, 99% of so-called news stories in print media are bullshit. And the other 1% have grains of truth in, but are largely blown out of proportion or distorted by journalists. Now, I know there are some little exceptions to that now and again, but generally speaking, that is why public relations firms exist. And I'm not saying you're like Max Clifford, but everyone knows Max Clifford's stories were full of crap. And that his whole industry was, I've got this client, I'll let you, Mr. Newspaper, have this story if, for letting you have this story, you cover my new life coach or new hypnotist client in this positive manner with this angle I'll give you. You can have this celebrity TV presenter story if you run with this one as well. And they leverage things. So television shows, I'll tell you where this is coming about. I saw the other day on social media, you were appealing for somebody with an addiction to box set TV who'd be willing to go on television to be cured live. And I ask you this question. Why didn't you just coerce one of your previous clients into doing it. Now, I know the obvious answer to that is, well, they're now cured. But I can tell you for certain that a certain famous television hypnotist, dare I mention their name? I will. Sod it, it's me who gets sued. Paul McKenna has in the past taken someone that is cured at his live NLP event, and then when he's required somebody with that phobia to go on Let's Take a Random Show, like the Ruby Wax show on BBC Two, exactly that show, has then rehypnotise the person to reinstall the phobia briefly, which means he's guaranteed to be cured quicker on TV, but also meant he had somebody he knew he was going to be 1,000,000% successful with, and someone who was up for it because they'd already stood up in front of a room full of, say, 800 people at a NLP course, so going on TV they were kind of already cool with. Without mentioning that person's name, so you're not in any legal hot bother, I'm quite happy to put my neck on the line there. How do you see that ethically? Why? Because
why didn't I make it up?
You clearly wouldn't do that, otherwise you wouldn't have been advertising for.
Yeah, so in that particular case, quite a high-profile morning show saw all of this media coverage, reached out, and they said, "Well, look, we're interested in having someone that has this particular condition." And for me, immediately I thought, well, let's put a post out because someone might know someone that is really struggling with this kind of thing. Now, for me, if I would have just, let's say, found a mate or a friend or something like that was more than happy to just play along with it, well, it seems to me that your perception of this TV hypnotherapist that did this live TV thing is diminished because the fact that that actually they had someone that was going to completely go along with whatever was being said. Well, if that's your perception, it might be other people's perceptions as well. So for me,
found out. I mean, yeah, totally. Most people wouldn't find out. I have insider media contacts, and again, I mean, there's a lot of famous name television therapists, whether they come under hypnosis or life coaching, who I can't 1,000,000% sit here and say, no, they are dealing with people who don't really have that problem. But if I, as a curious individual who does do this, can, through a quick Google search of the nature of this weird phobia, find the individual who was on television that morning and apparently cured, selling their story to a woman's magazine, on a regular basis over the period of the past 8 years, that pretty much tells me this is somebody who's in it to get media attention and make some money, and them being cured that morning is going to be the easiest thing on the planet because they've never had the bloody problem in the first place.
And I think there is a little bit of gamesmanship that takes place with the media, and the thing is, I mean, firsthand, controversy is one of those things that can make a story more interesting. And I think the other thing is that at some level, the moment someone's willing to go on TV, there's a similar dynamic to stage hypnosis in the sense that there is a certain expectation as to what's going to happen. And I've seen, I mean, whether it's Richard Bandler kind of fearing, curing Michael Van Stratten or Michael Stratton's, whatever his name, that American host Snake on air and things like that. There are lots of things where effectively the law of expectancy is a change is going to take place. And the moment the cameras are on you, there is an element of disassociation and people are going to be in a deeper level of trance, and they're literally going to go on with it. Whether or not that change sticks, 3 months later, well, the cameras aren't on them at that point. So it's kind of mission accomplished. For me, I would always rather be, outside of getting results for clients, one of my key things is congruency. And I think there's a lot of therapists out there that are very talented. Unfortunately, there's a lot of therapists out there that don't really walk their talk. So for me, part of the reason why I specialize in phobias is because I had a high level of anxiety. I had genuine phobias myself and had to work on that as an individual. For me, there's certain key people in my life that they've got certain addictions that they don't want help. They don't want change. So for me, if I can take that frustration and kind of steer it in the direction of someone that they do want change, but they don't know what to do, and they are looking for external help, then for me, it's about walking the talk. And I think anyone can fake stuff. It's so easy to kind of fake stuff. But partly when you kind of are willing to kind of have that standard of, well, yeah, I could fake it, but actually I want to do it for real. Well, then that kind of reputation gets around as well. And I think, overall, the profession of particularly hypnotherapy, but any kind of change work needs people that, how they are when they're on camera or how they are when they're in the media are exactly how they are when they're with a client one-on-one working with them. And I think overall that's good for the industry and it's good for that individual, because then people seek that kind of therapist out.
Yeah, maybe one day we will live in that world. Sadly, we currently don't. I won't mention names there, but there is a large number of media therapists who the only reason why they would be able to duplicate what they do on television with clients on the street is because they've got this perceived credibility that's been built up by being seen on television in the media. And that itself is what does the hypnosis, if you like.
Totally. In a way, that's priming, isn't it? And I don't see any qualms with that at all. If I'm doing a workshop, I'll let people know the kind of people that I've worked with and that I'm featured in the media, because effectively it increases the belief in my competency, which then makes me a better therapist. And I think all therapists should use any trick in the book if it helps them to become better therapists. I think, if it helps that you wear a white coat, if it helps that you've got a doctor in front of your name, if it helps any of these kind of things, then why not? Because effectively we're in the industry of shifting beliefs, and at some level that law of expectancy and all these kind of principles like compliance and all this kind of stuff, well, for me, they're all tools that can help cultivate a change. And if we can use these tools in the right way, if I don't have certificates on the side of my wall, but there has been research that if in the waiting area you see the qualifications of the therapist, then effectively it gives you greater confidence in their ability to create a change, and therefore greater change takes place. Any of these tricks, I think, if they work and they serve the client that you're working with, why the hell not? It's a good tool.
Oh yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, what film is it? Leap of Faith with Steve Martin, where he's playing a fraudulent evangelical preacher. Are there any others? But he gets confronted by the police officer, and the police officer guy said, look, no one else around, not going to arrest you. Is what you do real or not? And he says, I think the line is, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but what's it matter just so long as the job gets done? And I do agree that if a client's paying for the result of coming to you or another therapist, they're addicted to box set TV, you go through whatever ritualistic, important seeming process, and they leave, and that no longer bothers them like it once did in the past, then does it really matter how you got them to that point? Because they got what they paid for, yeah?
I'm a part of me really agrees with that kind of, because I'm so obsessed with getting results. But I think where it becomes a slippery slope is if you say, well, the end justifies the means. Well, then at what point do you take any kind of pride in what you do? I think there's a fine line, and I think that's really what integrity is. It's being willing to get the result, but not sacrifice any of the shortcuts that could do that. Because you could just kind of be lazy with it. A hypnotherapist that I worked with very early on in my career, I was kind of still a student, and I was fortunate enough to kind of do work experience. And what I'd learned, some of these NLP techniques to be, I saw him do it, and it wasn't quite right. And at the end of the session, I said, it was interesting how you did that particular approach, because that's not really how it's taught. And what he said was really powerful and really interesting. He said, look, if people believe in my ability to create a change, then it doesn't have to be done perfectly. They just have to feel like something is happening. He said something like, if someone 100% believes that you've got magic dust, and if you sprinkle on it, they're going to create a change, then a change will take place. And I genuinely believe that has a lot of power. But I also believe that there is certain things that are going to be more effective than other things. And yeah, for me, so long as you get the result and do whatever you can to help achieve that result, then that's a good thing. But I think, having, fake testimonials, for example, or certain things that, it could achieve the job, but equally, why not just go out there and get real clients, sharing their experiences? And I think, that's the kind of thing that, it certainly helps if you do it properly. Not to say, I remember one example. I did a clown phobia workshop once when the first thing of It came out.
On my notes, memory points. I'm going to bring that up, but brilliant. You're ahead of me.
Yeah, so called Phobia, and what was annoying, because this documentary, this little film, never actually got released in the end, and I invested quite a bit of time in it. But he said, can you find any coulrophobics that is actually willing to do it? And I couldn't. It was really hard to do it. So I just put an advert in one of these casting sites, like Backstage or Start that kind of thing. And I said, look, does anyone here, want to be, you'll get the footage, you'll get, I'll pay you for your time, but you have to have a genuine phobia of this kind of stuff. And I found someone, but possibly they were willing to kind of go along with it more than.
Excellent. I'm so glad you brought that up, because you're ahead of me, and it wasn't about clown phobias I was going to bring it up, but it was going to be more of an extension on the ethics thing. But there's plausible deniability there, if you look at it that way, because you've clearly stated you must have and I've seen this a lot with television hypnotists, therapists, life coaches, call them what you will. They do a lot of these shows, the TV researchers. I'm not saying it's the therapist that does it, so I'm giving plausible deniability there. I'm also giving myself a legal protection against defamation. But adverts do go on things like Star Now a lot, and it's amazing how many of these people with issues end up having been found through sites where the people on there have at least a desire for attention, or I've got a background in amateur dramatics or stuff. What I'm blatantly saying is that, yes, they could just be blatantly lying to you because they want to be on TV, get a nice hotel for the night, which they tend to do, and they're 100, well, actually, it's gone up. Last time this morning, got me to get somebody there, a totally unknown person was getting at least 250 quid out of pocket expenses, as well as a trip and a nice hotel and all this, and something to stick on their CV. And it does happen a lot. Well, I mean, where do you see the ethics in that? Because deep down, you must know the chances are that person that replied probably didn't really have that issue to the. I've always said, anyone with a true phobia would not willingly put themselves on television or a live radio show, cold, without any previous treatment to calm them down. Just the thought of knowing that in that context, they must know as an adult that they're going to get confronted with that which bothered them.
I mean, I agree, and I think, but that's no different from Tony Robbins doing an intervention like live in front of 5,000 people. It's the same premise, and that is that you're all eyes on you. You get to be the star of the show. But that's no different from stage hypnotism. I
totally agree.
It's a very similar premise, but I think overall the media game is that they need content, they need interesting things, and what makes therapy, whether it's on TV or on a stage, interesting, is this archetype of the magician. It's kind of like you want to see a rapid change, and that rapid change. The person that's the participant in that, they know that if they go in and nothing much happens, then that's kind of, well, they kind of feel like, well, that was a bit of a kind of a damp squib. The producer probably annoyed that they've kind of paid these expenses out. The therapist looks like a bit of an idiot. So overall, take out hypnosis. There is other principles here. It's compliance.
Can you remember a time in the past? I can, prior to sort of the 90s, I can. But once we hit the early 90s, where television on a worldwide basis became more run, they were more run by accountants than what I would call showbiz and entertainment people. And when it became run by accountants, where they've got to get the water cooler moment, people talking, and that means then more people will watch, they can charge more for the advertising space and the adverts and all that. Then you got your researchers who quite often, possibly without the therapist's knowledge, are getting in glorified actors through these sites to pretend to have phobias and issues. And the therapist may very well genuinely believe that person, because the producer and the researchers are saying, we've checked out the background and they've had this problem for years. So I'm not blaming the therapist, but the law of averages said, if you weren't just getting attention-seeking fuckwits, as I call them affectionately, who want the 5 minutes of fame on TV, and then also know 9 times out of 10 they can get another couple of £100 for the Chat magazine article after they've been on the morning show, that they wouldn't agree to go on because they know they'll be confronted by the thing.
I think if it's a phobia, it's different, but also you get lots of different issues. I think the reason why phobia things on air are quite popular is because you see the before and after very, very quickly. Whereas if you had someone on that has 4 stone worth of weight to lose, from an audience perspective, well, you're going to have to remember that original show 4 months ago to then see the transformation. And I think that's why. To the
viewer, I am not saying that it's impossible to make those changes as quick as they appear to be on TV. In fact, from experience, I know Adam will assure you, I'm assuring you, and I'm sure a lot of you watching know that you can get somebody in your office, and sometimes in a matter of literally just a couple of minutes, have them cured. Quite often it can be more like half an hour, an hour. But rapid change can definitely take place. All I'm saying is, once it's taken place, many of these people will be so over the moon that they probably quite happily go on TV to sing your praises. But before they are cured, I don't believe that people with a true megaphobia, like it comes across on TV often, would actually volunteer to be on TV if it was really that much of an issue, because they know they're going to be confronted with it.
I don't know, because you could use that same argument for people that come to my spider workshops, and there's consistently 20 people about once a month. They turn up and they know they're going to be confronted with a massive tarantula and a house spider, but they do it, and they do it because they've had this thing is really affecting their life, and they have a combination of a degree of confidence in the ability that it will happen, probably because they've seen other testimonials of people go through exactly what they're going through, but also hope. They've got this desperate hope that there is a future out there for them where this fear doesn't exist. Because if it was simply the belief that if they're going to be confronted, they'd never do it, well, any kind of immersive experience would prohibit. That would be the worst business model in the world. But I think it's because at some level people are realizing that change can happen, and it can happen relatively quick. And actually, rather than it being a negative part of the therapy, for me, I look at the immersive part of any therapy as the nail in the coffin of the phobia, because it creates a belief shift. The convincer strategy effectively is that if you do the thing that you didn't think that you could do just 10 minutes ago, and you're actually doing it, well, then that phobia can't still exist. And at that point, I find that if I do phobia work with and without a convincer, the convincer, well, they don't come back again. Whereas if someone has a fear of sharks and you do great therapy in the room, they leave thinking, well, I don't know if this has worked or not. But in Harley Street, if I work with someone with a fear of birds, literally straight after the session, we're walking down to Cavendish Square, a fuck ton of pigeons there, and you can see it in their face. They're this far away from a pigeon, and they're like, how the fuck am I doing this? How am I so close when I've had this for so long? And that, for me, is more important than the therapy itself. The therapy is just getting to that point where they do that very thing, because then it's like, well, something must have changed. And then in terms of whether you believe in timeline therapy or not, from that point onwards, that now is a reference point that they are over their fear. It's kind of like a line in the sand. So from that point of view, I do think immersive therapy is right. And I genuinely do think that some people would be willing to be on TV, because their thought process is, well, the therapist that's on TV must be highly competent, otherwise they wouldn't be on TV. And therefore, maybe this is the light at the end of the tunnel for this kind of anxiety creating state that they've been in. So you're right, there's going to be some people that are using it to raise their own profile, but you could say that about every contestant on a dating show. At some level, it's kind of like they get the game. They get the game. They know that, if someone's on X Factor, if someone's on Love Island, there might be a slight motive that they want to do certain things, but the bigger motive is that for that moment they get their 15 minutes of fame.
So let's briefly look at the negatives of me. Obviously, the positives are quite obviously. You mentioned before, you get more website traffic. Ultimately, can lead to more clients, product sales if you're into that thing. What would you say to people regards the warnings of the negative side of publicity? By that I mean, even if the story is one that's positive and makes you look good in helping people, there are people that walk this planet that that's why celebrities quite often start drinking in different places, because if they go down the local pub they used to, they'll have the core friends that'd be fine with them, but then other people will go, oh, you flipping think you're something special, and people jealousy of people in the media. What advice would you give people who might be going down the PR?
In terms of getting too high profile, and I think there is an element in the UK particularly of that tall poppy syndrome, where if someone gets too high profile, they want to knock them down to size, and I do think that's an unfortunate genuine part of kind of British society in a way. But I think for the average therapist out there that is going to be featured in the media, well, the reality is, you are adding an element to a particular story for a particular point in time. It's you're not going to get Prince Harry, Meghan Markle kind of fame. It's not that the paparazzi are going to be hunting you down. It's not that people are going to be sneering at you, thinking, who the fuck are you, being in the media all the time, because it's within hypnosis and kind of psychology, mentalism. I mean, who's in that kind of bracket? What, Paul McKenna, Darren Brown? Very few people are in there. And if Richard Bandler was to walk down the street, nobody would. Why
do you think there's only a few in that bracket? I mean, I actually know why that is, not just an opinion. I know because from behind the scenes, but I'd like your.
I think it's
only a very few.
I think it's for me, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it. But for me, I think it's the nature and still the influence of primetime and mainstream TV. I think if you've got, because there are people with huge views on YouTube and Facebook, but I think you get huge elevated positioning and status, and effectively you hit the celebrity bit once you have a TV show that's kind of been on there for a while. And obviously Paul McKenna was very fortunate to do that in the 90s. Darren Brown with his kind of Channel 4 shows. So I think when you hit that element, then effectively you get accepted at that celebrity status rather than just, highly competent kind of specialist status. And the thing is, in the brand positioning ladder in our minds, there isn't that much room for like 10 different celebrity hypnotists, for example. You tend to have, one or two, and then you pretty much forget. And I remember seeing a stage hypnotist when I was like 13 or 14. And a few years later, my mum categorically told me that I'd seen Paul McKenna, and I knew for certain it wasn't. But in her head, that's the name linked to a stage hypnotist. And I think that's why it's that there isn't that much room in people's minds to kind of link names to kind of hypnotists. So effectively, you've got Darren Brown as a mentalist, and you've got Paul McKenna as a hypnotist. And outside of that, well, those spots have been taken, really. And for people in the industry, they know that, there's potentially more competent people in those areas, but those little slots have kind of been filled. But I'd be curious to hear your take on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, largely it's the old boys club. Television at a certain level, especially with PR companies and casting companies, entering a certain circle. If you're not in that circle, forget it. It's very much like a glorified version of the Masons. There's that element. There's the element my context here is that there are dozens upon dozens of television celebrity chefs, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And people know Jamie Oliver, but equally they also know Gordon Ramsay. And what they do is they all cook. Now, I know there are sub-niches. You've got your seafood chef, and I've just had a mental block on him, and I won't mind because I watch him regularly with my wife.
Rick Stein?
Rick Stein, yeah. Okay, so you think Rick Stein, generally speaking, you think seafood stuff. You think Jamie Oliver, and you think it's all very rustic, thrown together type food. So there are sub-niches, I get that, but ultimately, they all cook food.
Mm.
In the same way as ultimately, your Paul McKenna, your Speakmans on This Morning, and whatnot, cure people's phobias or help them overcome habits, addictions, or whatever. So why aren't there more? And this is not personally pointing the finger at anyone in particular, but I think because people in the self-help, hypnosis, even if it's entertainment industries, largely speaking, if they get to a certain level of success, they will do everything they can beyond. I'm not saying celebrity chefs won't try and protect their field, but hypnotists, therapists are so psychologically screwed up, the majority of them, and insecure, that when they do get some success, they will go to the most extraordinary means, but they'll deflect it, more than likely, through their publicists doing certain things, to ensure that nobody else can take that kind of slot unless they've got extraordinarily large amounts of money to be paying sort of 15 grand a month plus that up front for at least 6 to 12 months to a PR company to even get a foot in the door properly. Is my, not just opinion, but actual cold hard experience. Max Clifford once said to me, if I paid him, back then it was 10 grand. 10 grand plus VAT, and that's when VAT was 15%. For a minimum of 6 months, paid up front, that he guaranteed that by the end of that 6 months, I would have a television series. Point one. Point two, if I then continued paying him for at least 3 years, he guaranteed I would be a cash millionaire by the end of it. And I know for a fact he's done that for numerous people. But it's that juxtaposition back then in the early 90s, where was I suddenly going to find the initial 70, 80 grand? I wasn't. I didn't. But if you've got the money, that's how you, in the particular hypnosis and certain showbizy niches, unless you're lucky enough to win a competition. That's my experience of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with that, because I think a lot of people think that there's more barriers. I thought there'd be more barriers. When I became a qualified hypnotherapist, I thought it would take years and years to kind of grow a practice and be able to get PR coverage, because I thought all the slots would be filled. No,
don't get me wrong. Getting PR coverage is the easiest thing on the planet. If you come up, the more ridiculous a story you come up with, what's the most ridiculous thing? I look around my office room now, and right, I've got a stuffed toy there on the notice board holding a banana that my daughter gave me. So bananas. Someone who's got a phobia of tripping on banana skins in public. They're fine eating a banana for this story that we're making up, but they're scared of potentially tripping on a banana skin. And yes, they do admit that it's probably more about looking daft in public, so we can create this scenario that sounds feasible. But the idea of somebody's life having potentially been ruined because they're always looking for banana skins is something, if you were to get, I would guess, a nice looking young female of legal age, but young looking, that was to dress in a manner that your tabloid Sun or Daily Star reporter would love the fact they were showing a little tiny bit of cleavage, but not too obviously. Yeah, you'll be in the newspapers before the end of this week with that story. Somebody bothered to get somebody to front it. And yes, I am categorically saying
I also think though, but in terms of like the boys club,
but
in
my
terms
point
of,
is, I defy you, I guarantee you could not get yourself a contract to appear every week or once every fortnight, twice a month, for a guaranteed 12-month period on certain morning television shows, because they've already got somebody contracted to it.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna have like regular kind of guests. So in the same way that each TV show tends to have, it used to be Dr. Hilary Jones on certain TV things, or whoever it might be. Yeah, so you're gonna have like go-to kind of experts that are on the books. So yeah, there's gonna be certain things that are kind of slots that are taken. But at the same time, I also think there is this psychological principle of people not having that much time to kind of relate experts. I mean, the last mainstream hypnosis show in the UK was probably Back in the Room. And I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what hypnotist fronted that. I've got no idea. That ran for 2 series.
That's bloody fortunate for him then, because that is without doubt the biggest abysmal piece of shit that's ever been on TV. A game show where the premise is hypnotize people at the end. I give them suggestions by the hypnotist that certain things will occur, and those certain things are to stop them being able to move these balls from one side of the area to the other, and they need to get a certain amount of balls to win money. It's fundamentally screwed up, because if hypnosis exists, stage hypnosis, then, and the people weren't just attention-seeking footwits found off Star Now, which they all were, because I did a blog at it and exposed every single one of the contestants practically. If they were genuinely hypnotized, when they were told that every time the hypnotist, who incidentally was called Keith Barry, coughed, they got an electric shock, they would believe it, do it, and their reaction would be that I get on stage when I do it to people, that they would drop all the bloody balls. But no, they kept hold of some of them because they know it's worth money. We're going to make it look believable because of my planned future acting career, where this will be a credit, but I also want some money.
Yeah, no, it's tricky, but I think one of the problems with kind of TV hypnosis is that there's a lack of original formats out there, with the kind of people that I listened to a podcast where Darren Brown was talking about, after his first 2 series that he did, or shows that he did on Channel 4, he was still working as a close-up magician for like £100 an evening, because although he was on TV, that hadn't converted into kind of like well-paid corporate work at that point. Yeah. So there is this kind of overall perception that the moment you're on TV, you've made it, but actually that is a part of building a brand. And Paul McKenna has done very well, because effectively I think he's something like the best-selling non-fiction author in the UK, and that's because his brand is that he can cultivate change, and I think that once you have that brand, well, then he's been highly effective at monetizing that brand. But you're right, there's going to be barriers to entry in any kind of thing that gives you that element of status and positioning. And for me, I think what I like about my background in PR and my interest in hypnosis is that, I'm kind of aware of the landscape to some extent, and you have to make it, a win for everyone. It's got to be a win for the audience. It's got to be a win for the producers. It's got to be a win for yourself. You're right. It's relatively easy to get coverage, but getting coverage for the sake of coverage makes yourself look like an attention-seeking fuckwit, rather than, being strategic with the kind of coverage that you're getting. And I think, that's when you see people that are on, kind of Big Brother and Love Island, that's how they come across. It's kind of, they've got no discernible talent. They just want to be famous for the sake of being famous. And I think
there's nothing to sell. I mean, at least with a therapist, if you've already got a phobia relevant product, for example, I know that you've got the home study 7-day phobia cure package. So whatever phobia, it's still a phobia, and that product will be relevant. People may find your website if you're in the media. So as long as you've got a relevant product, it could lead to making you monetary conversion.
Totally.
The more media you get, the more you'll build up a kind of, even if it's only on a local level, more likely that they're going to come to you again, the media, because you're regularly getting seen. I mean, you've got a major advantage because you came from knowing these things from the PR. What if you had to sum it up in a sentence to your average therapist who's got these skills that can really help people change their lives positively for the better, who maybe has written a book, who has put together some wonderful thing that they've tested it out on people, they've sold a few from the website, they sold a few dozen, but they'd like to be able to get PR to take that into the hundreds and the thousands of sales and of helping people. I know some of them will have mental blocks thinking, well, I am not Paul McKenna. I am not, Darren Brown. I am not Adam Cox, who's been there, done it. What would you say to them to give them the kick up the arse, or perhaps the inner confidence that, everyone was nobody at some point?
Yeah, and I would use my own kind of story about this. I knew how to do it for massive brands. I mean, I've got PR coverage for Microsoft and IBM and massive pharma companies and Ben and Jerry's and that kind of stuff. So, but when I started doing it for myself, it felt different because I'm like, well, I'm not a brand. Why would they be interested in me? And to begin with, I just thought of something topical. So the first press release I sent out was a couple of weeks before Christmas. And I just put weight loss hypnotherapist, Adam Cox gives 5 top tips of how to cope with the festive season without piling on the pounds. Knowing that there's a few magazines out there that might want that kind of content. Yeah. And the reality is I didn't have a brand at that point. Nobody knew who I was. It was just kind of getting it out there. And I got 2 bits of shit coverage. I was in Wellbeing News and I was in the Bromsgrove Gazette or something like that. Mm-hmm. But what I did is I then clipped that coverage and then I had a little press section and then I just kind of put it there. And then I got a little bit more bits of shit coverage and put it there. And then what happens over time is that journalists, they want to have a safe pair of hands. They don't want someone that, could be reckless and not know the game. So now if a journalist goes to my website and they see that I've been on Victoria Derbyshire, if I've been on Jeremy Vine, if I've been on Sky News, they like, well, this guy knows what's what, But that didn't happen overnight. To begin with, I just had to get regional press and very community radio and things like that. And I would say to get the ball rolling, reach out to your community radio station and just say, you specialize in this area and you just want to talk about the number of people in that area that have that problem and how hypnosis can help. And that one bit of coverage starts the ball rolling. You don't go from 0 to being front page of the Sun or kind of, a big full page in the Telegraph. You get the ball rolling. And I'm a big fan of momentum. And I think once you get going, that not every media interview is going to be like Humphreys or Paxman trying to trip you up and catch you out. You realize that a lot of the time they just want something interesting. They want a catchy soundbite. And once you know that game, you feel more confident. And I'll be honest, the first kind of radio interview I did, I was nervous about it. And now it's kind of like having done so many radio interviews, I could do a radio interview at 1 minute's notice and I'd be completely fine, because the more it's like, being a practicing hypnotherapist, the more you do it, the more confident you get. And then you don't need the same level of preparation as you did when you first started. So just start is what I would say, and start small, but don't be dismissive of that small bit of coverage, because it all helps.
If, of course, relating back to what you said earlier, and that is only if you as an individual don't feel you have to go out there and get media, because there are people who never get in the media during their career and who are doing incredibly well. Through word of mouth or through other conventional.
Yeah, it's true. I would echo that sentiment. For me, the reason why I use SEO and PR as my main marketing strategy is because I'm not very good on social media. And if you're great on Instagram, if you're amazingly good looking, then Instagram, use that. If you come from an analytical background and you're really hot on digital marketing and everything about Facebook algorithms and boosting posts, then maybe digital marketing is the way. But I would say that you do need something, because otherwise, for me, there's so many hypnotherapists that I studied with that aren't practicing hypnotherapists because they couldn't make the numbers work. They couldn't make it so that it was worth them continuing to do that. And I would say that's the real tragedy, is where you've got competent, good therapists that can genuinely help people, but they're not because they're a bad therapist, but because they just didn't find a strategy of acquiring good quality clients to make the whole thing profitable. And that, for me, if someone was to leave this interview with one thought, is kind of find some form of marketing that is going to get you clients in a cost-effective way, because then you're staying in the game, and the longer you stay in the game, the more that you will build that word of mouth and that reputation and create clients from that. But it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to find a way that works for you.
Excellent piece of advice. And I think that's something that, this isn't likely to be watched by the general public anyway. But I think the general public, yes, they do listen to word of mouth, which is great because results are what count. But marketing news, right, whether it's PR, digital marketing, which is why people do it, convince them of something that may not always be true. And yeah, if they were to look at things like, has this therapist been around for ages? They might be completely unknown, but if they've been around for ages and they're not obviously doing it part-time, they must be pretty good at what they do, because otherwise they wouldn't have stayed in business. There's that element as well. What can I say? I've learned a fair bit during this past hour. I'm sure that people who've had no media background will have done. I hope you don't feel that I've chucked in any kind of trying to be too tricky questions there. No, I absolve full responsibility for any suggestions of people who may or may not exist in reality on TV shows doing things or not in reality. I take full legal responsibility for that. I particularly like the fact that, and it's true, it's quite logical that Adam wouldn't have worked, his PR company wouldn't be working or work with these big brands if he didn't have a certain code of ethical conduct and way of doing things. So it doesn't surprise me that you've carried that over into the therapy arena as well. And it's nice and refreshing to actually see somebody getting media coverage who, when they're offered TV stuff like that, hasn't just gone, well, I'll just pull my mate in to go on that TV show. It's refreshing to see somebody actually doing it legitimately and honestly. It is perhaps the way to put it. So thank you very much indeed for your time. Please, can you tell everybody what your websites are so they can come and check you out? Because, therapists out there, you might be thinking, you need to go and keep an eye on Adam's website, because although we're recording this on the 13th of January, it's not going to go out until February. And it's then going to exist in the wonderful world of the internet. So you might be seeing this in years to come or months to come when Adam's home study PR course is out there and ready and available. And if it's not, keep checking back on his website, because I know for certain that when he releases it, I'm going to get it to look at, because somebody who's worked with brands as big as the Relations Group has got to have knowledge that I currently don't have, that you currently don't have, that if it can help those big brands, can definitely help the likes of you and me to get more clients and business. So tell people where they should be looking at them.
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in what I do with phobias, it's phobiaguru.com. I have a weight loss brand called hypnoslimming.com. My brand for addiction, so there's lots of examples of PR coverage on these websites, is addictionexperts.co.uk. And a site that I'm building at the moment, which is my own personal brand, is adamcox.co.uk. And also look for me on Facebook, which is just Adam Cox.
And I'll put these links below the video. So if you've seen this on YouTube or Vimeo, below will be active hyperlinks to click on, so you can follow Adam, and as soon as it's out, grab that home study course as well. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure.